Someone sent me kind of like a meme sort of a thing the other day where it's like one of those blackboards that you put the little white letters on. And I typed it out because I want to make sure that I got it exactly right. It said this: adulthood is saying, but after this week, things will slow down a bit, over and over and over again until you die. And I thought, that's pretty accurate as I'm finding it so far. Next week, things will slow down over and over and over again. And so far, things have not yet slowed down, right? I mean, it's just kind of the way that life works. And we may think, okay, now it's going to be summer, so everything will just kind of get quieter. But there's always things on the horizon, things that we're not in control of, things we didn't expect, that have a way of popping up, like storms on the Sea of Galilee, right? And for better or for worse, sometimes maybe it's something really good, like a promotion or, something exciting that happens, families coming to town to visit. Sometimes it's not so good. Let's just say you're on a ladder doing some work at home and all of a sudden you're on the ground and it's not expected and you got to go to the hospital. Things that are just kind of crazy. We don't know exactly what's coming next. And we're not in control of whatever is coming next. And I think sometimes, like I said, we think, next week things will slow down. I know what I'm doing. I got this under control. And then the next thing happens, right? It's saying that over and over again until you die. So with that in mind, I think that's a great way to look at this particular gospel this weekend, especially taking it in context. Because this gospel, so this is Mark 4, begins at 35, ends at the end of chapter 4, which is verse 41. This picks up right where last week's gospel left off. If you remember, last week we had Jesus giving some parables to the crowds, about the farmer who scatters his seed. Night and day, he rises, he goes to sleep. The seed keeps growing, he knows not how. And then Jesus moves into the parable of the mustard seed that we all know so well about it being the smallest of seeds, but it becomes the greatest of bushes that all the birds of the air can land in. And then St. Mark tells us Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. In fact, everything he said to them was in parables, but to his disciples, he explained everything in private. Now, to our modern ears, that can sound like, oh, ooh la la, look at these disciples. They're so special. They're elite. They understand everything because Jesus is just giving it all to them, right? Well, as we pick up at this gospel, right, on that day, so the very day he's explaining everything in private, then on that day as evening, darkness drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, let us cross to the other side. And then leaving the crowd, they took Jesus with them in the boat. Now, we just heard it all. You know what's going on. He's with these ones that are supposed to understand everything. He's been explaining everything in private, right? He's laying it all out there. How many of us in our life think I got this down. I understand the principles. I know what's going on. Everything is great. And then life continues to happen. And there's the next thing, the next crisis, the next fire, the next surprise, right? There's always stuff coming at us. But what's the important thing to recognize? Jesus is with us in the boat. Yes, we are not in control. We are not in control of the storm and the sea. We are not in control of everything around us all of the time. And we can say to God, why? Why is this happening? Why this? Why now? And that's where the church in her infinite wisdom gives us the first reading from Job. Now, granted, it's a very small snippet. We only get 3 verses from Job. I'm assuming you kind of know the story of Job, but basically after all these horrible things happened to him, after Satan demanded to test him and Job didn't sin, but all of this stuff is happening. And he's saying, why? And ultimately the answer we get is God saying, I'm God and you're not. Just calm down. And ultimately, as we live like that, right? Recognizing not just the fact that he's God and we're not, but that God wasn't content to just stay in the storm in this way as he is with Job, but wants to be in the storm in an even more present way in the boat, right? Asleep on the cushion at the stern of the boat. He's there with them. Now, clearly, they don't understand yet who they are dealing with, because notice what they say to try to wake him up. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Whenever it says teacher, not Lord, it's like, okay, you're doing a great job talking. Thanks for those awesome parables, but we don't really understand who you are yet, right? And I got to tell you, too, I don't understand what they were expecting at this point either. I mean, it says that there was a violent squall, waves were breaking over, and the boat was already filling up. And by the way, remember, most of these disciples are fishermen. So they're used to being on the sea. And so it's like they're going to the teacher, not another fisherman. I don't know what they're expecting. Like, are you going to get a bucket and help us like scoop some of this out? I mean, it's like filling up. I don't know what they expect. But yet, do you not care that we are perishing? And then, of course, obviously we know, he rebukes the wind. Quiet, be still. Do you not yet have faith? He's there with them. They go to him, and obviously they're learning more and more. They're seeing that fact that, yes, he is there. And another part of just the wisdom of the church this morning, and I don't reference them enough, but Psalm 107 that we just heard, it's, basically this hymn of thanksgiving. It's called a Todah psalm. And it references a point when some Israelites, are sailing on the sea, similar situation, big storm, all this happening. And I got to tell you too, I was really listening today to Flora singing it so beautifully, because there's some lines in this that are like you look, okay, the storms, the waves mounted up to heaven, then they sank to the depths. Their hearts melted away in their plight. Like it just, like their hearts melted away. That's how scared they were, and yet they cried out to the Lord in their distress, and what happened? He calmed the storm. They were able to get home. They were counting his wondrous deeds. And I think too often, we don't do that enough, right? How many times in our life have we thought, well, this is it. There's no way I'm going to make it out of this. Like my car is rattling, it's about to break down. I'm just done for. And yet, he's there to get us through. I mean, I remember being in seminary and thinking, how in the world am I going to get this master's thesis written? I'm never going to be ordained a priest. Like, there's no way this is ever happening. And yet, I don't mean to give it away, but I eventually got it done. I'm ordained a priest, right? Like, but how often do I go back and say, you got me through that? Like, I mean, okay, you're still here. You're in the boat. And to recognize the fact that, yes, he wants to be in this with us, but also, he loves us and respects us and wants us to be able to grow and do our parts with his help, right? Like it wouldn't be merciful for him to just take over the whole thing, right? Like if I think back to struggles in grade school, like, I'm having such a hard time getting through 4th grade math. If my mom had been like, Johnny, no worries, I'll take that test for you. Okay, I wouldn't have passed 4th grade math, which is a point that you have to do to keep moving on. He can't just step in and just make it all happen, but he doesn't leave us alone. He stays there with us. And my friends, he is here with us at the heart of the church, in the tabernacle, all of the time. And you think about the very way that we construct our churches and the names of things, like the nave. It's a lot of like maritime imagery and all of this, what word am I looking for? Vocabulary, right? Basically, as we sail through this life, he's in it with us. And I know that there are times that he seems awfully quiet, but he's here all of the time. And even as we look at the next thing, we know that we're not in charge. We know that there will be waves, yet he's stronger than the waves. In fact, he's conquered death itself, right? He himself has gone down to the very depths, to the very farthest reaches of God-forsakenness as he died on the cross and descended into hell. And we cannot get away from him. And ultimately, as we look at this, the only thing we have to fear is sin, jumping out of the boat, moving away from him. As long as we recognize that he is in our midst, it's just like we yell at every school mass. What did John Paul II remind us? Do not be afraid. Thank you for kind of yelling that with me. Yes, that it's so good that he is here. I'll just kind of conclude in saying, the beginning of the second reading today, For those of you who like insider baseball and have been paying attention for a long time, the opening line of the second reading was the motto, or is the motto, of Bishop Jugas, right? It's Caritas Christi Urgit Nos. The love of Christ impels us. We know he's in the boat. We know that we can keep going. It impels us. And I think it's wonderful to get that at this sort of transitional time of our diocese. Because you take that motto and put it together with our new bishop's motto, Michael Martin, which is Duc in Altum, put out into the deep. Because ultimately we know that next week, I hate to tell you this, it's not going to slow down, right? We're going to keep saying next week will be slower over and over and over until we die. But we don't have to be afraid. Why? Because the love of Christ impels us to keep going, to put out into the deep. That whatever he is calling us to, the ways that he wants us to grow in holiness, the ways that he wants us to take his love out into the world, to show the world that it's possible, to be quiet, to be still, to rest and know that he is God in the boat with us. Because we know that, we can in fact put out into the deep. So my brothers and sisters in Christ, do not be afraid, because we know our Lord loves us, and he is with us in the boat in good times and in bad. Praise be Jesus Christ.